Hi, I'm Dan Limbach, producer of the PharmaVOICE Webcast Network at the Scope Summit in Orlando, Florida. In this Editor's Take video, I meet with Jill Johnston, President, Study Planning and Site Optimization Division at WCG. Jill, thank you for taking some time out of your day to speak with us at the Scope Conference in Orlando.
Thanks. I really appreciate the opportunity to catch up with you guys and talk a little bit about my background and some of the information that I share with the industry today.
Excellent. Jill, in an ideal world, how would the clinical trial site activation process work?
Yeah, so in an ideal world, for me, it's really around maximizing the number of recruitment days that each individual site has to actually find patients and include them in clinical trials. So there's a lot of information around the processes in the beginning of a study that we really don't have a lot of extra time to fool around with. And so it's really important for us to kind of figure out those right areas to be able to focus, figure out an efficient way to manage those components, and then really execute on the delivery of that in a fast and efficient way.
Very good. So what are the biggest differences between that ideal and today's reality?
Yeah, so in my mind, I think there's a lot of disconnects. There's 1,000 different things that need to be done in the beginning of a clinical trial. And a lot of times what typically happens is that there's a lot of disconnects between all the different groups that contribute towards that green light approval or beginning of that study for that particular site. And so the groups don't typically always work together in an efficient manner. They're not communicating appropriately. And so for me, it really is opening up the communication channels, really trying to get to those specific areas where they're able to reduce time and really try to drive the efficiency on the back end of that process. A lot of times there's a lot of vendors and providers and partners that are involved. There might be multiple sponsor organizations and CROs, and so they really need to come together and work on a unified plan to really try to deliver on that. And there's a lot of communication gaps or different groups that get added at different times, and they don't always come together really and get onto the same page. So for me, the ideal world is that they would all be on the same page, communicating, singing from the same hymn sheet. But in reality, what's really happening is there's a lot of communication gaps, one-off conversations, and it's not unified, and that leads to delays down the road in study startup.
Absolutely. So let's dig a little bit deeper and talk about some of those hurdles. How can sponsors, CROs, and investigational sites overcome some of those challenges and expedite patient enrollment?
Yeah, so for me, it can't be in the heat of the battle. So for me, one of the things that we try to do is drive these efficiencies in the moment when a clinical trial is actually trying to get started or being run. A lot of times the groups probably need to get together to talk about standard processes or ways to do it differently. So really it means between clinical trials that we're partnering with all those different parties, the sponsors, the CROs, the providers, really coming up with a unified approach, thinking about how to do it in a very efficient manner, but not in the heat of trying to get a study started. Quite interestingly, a couple years ago, I had a great opportunity to sit with sponsors, CROs, and sites all in a roundtable setting. It was quite interesting that the sites in that roundtable didn't think that they were part of the problem. And so one of the things that we see is that we need to put the brutal facts on the table, talk about it, understand why it's happening, and then really come together with an idea for how we can improve it, and then test it. So all those groups need to come together. They can't be in isolation, trying to come up with a new plan, and then expect the rest of the key stakeholders to accept it without having a voice in the process.
That makes a lot of sense. So let's talk about the people. How do you encourage your team to keep taking a fresh approach or even risks to tackling some of these entrenched issues? It has to involve a lot of trust, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's a really good question. My background, I did all of those activities in study startup. I was an entry-level clinical trial associate, so I was on the ground level, working with the sites, working with the sponsors, and really trying to understand how we can move this process along. So I have a clear understanding of what it takes to get it done at the ground level. And so as I move through my career, I gain that trust and understanding because I've been there and I've done it. And so people tend to understand that I've got some experience with that. And then my second component is I'm really trying to motivate folks to see the bigger picture. I think they really need to understand the full context of the clinical trial, what we're trying to accomplish. Today, there's so much specialization in each of the different components. And when that happens, sometimes people lose the context of what the bigger picture is. And so I really try to make sure that they understand what we're trying to achieve, and then they understand their part in it. And then I really try to give them an opportunity to try something new. I'm always for a perfectionist. It's always just been the way that I've done things. So I know that there's multiple ways of getting something done. And so really having the courage to be able to figure out what we could have done differently and really try it for the next time. I allow my teams the ability to fail and fail fast. We need to learn from that. So I'm not trying to penalize them for making a mistake, but we really need to take those opportunities and learn from it. And so from a context perspective, have the ability to have the courage to take some new opportunities to do something different and really learn from the mistakes that we have. So it's not easy. If you go through the whole change management component of kind of the whole process, you need to understand those brutal facts, have the courage to make the change, and really learn from those mistakes. And so I try to live that in how I lead my teams. That's how I expect my management style to be. And I expect for my leaders to be able to emulate that as well. So it's really important to be able to have that courage, I think.
Well, that sounds like a great approach. Jill, thanks once again for spending some time with us at the SCOPE conference.
Yeah, I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you for watching this Editor's Take video. For more information about WCG, visit WCGclinical.com. And don't forget to check out our other Editor's Take videos at pharmavoice.com/videos.